January 31st, 1993. Rose Bowl Stadium, Pasadena, California. 133 million people watching. Michael Jackson stood motionless on a platform at the 50-yard line for 90 seconds. No movement, no acknowledgement. Just standing there while the crowd screamed. And in those 90 seconds, he delivered what many consider the greatest entrance in halftime show history. But here's what almost nobody remembers about that day. 7 months later, almost to the week, Michael Jackson's life would implode in ways he couldn't have imagined while standing on that stage. The Super Bowl 27 halftime show wasn't just a performance. It was the last moment the world saw Michael Jackson as purely triumphant. Everything that came after was different. This is the story of that performance. But more importantly, it's the story of what that performance represented. The peak before the fall, the moment of total control before everything spun wildly out of control, and the cruel timing that made one of the most watched performances in television history feel, in retrospect, like the end of an era nobody knew was ending. The Super Bowl halftime show in 1993 was a different beast than what it became later. Before Michael Jackson, halftime shows were marching bands and novelty acts. College drill teams, up with people. Spectacle, sure, but not the kind that stopped the world. The NFL wanted to change that. They wanted something that would keep viewers glued to their screens instead of switching channels or heading to the bathroom. They wanted an event within the event. And in 1992, they approached Michael Jackson. Michael was, at that moment, the biggest entertainer on the planet. Dangerous, his most recent album, had been released in November 1991. It was a commercial success, though not quite at the level of Thriller or Bad. Still, Michael Jackson agreeing to perform at the Super Bowl was a major coup for the NFL. He didn't need the exposure, he didn't need the paycheck. But according to people involved in the negotiations, Michael saw an opportunity, not for himself, for his causes. The deal was unusual. Michael would perform for free, but the NFL would donate to his Heal the World Foundation, a charity he'd established to help children around the world. The foundation was important to Michael. It wasn't just PR. He genuinely believed in using his platform for good, and the Super Bowl, with its massive audience, was the ultimate platform. Rehearsals began weeks before the game. Michael rented out the Rose Bowl for private sessions, working late into the night with his team of dancers, choreographers, and technical crew. The show was meticulously planned. Every second accounted for, every movement rehearsed to precision. Michael didn't do anything halfway. If he was going to perform at the Super Bowl, it was going to be perfect. And on January 31st, 1993, it was. The show opened with Michael being launched onto the stage from beneath the field. He landed, removed his sunglasses, and then did something nobody expected. He froze. Completely still. Arms at dramatic angles, head tilted. For 90 full seconds, he didn't move. The crowd went wild. The tension built. And then finally he moved. And the stadium exploded. The set list was carefully chosen. Jam, Billie Jean, Black or White. Heal the World, each song building on the last. The choreography was sharp. The production was flawless. Michael performed with the precision and energy he was known for. And the crowd, a sea of over 90,000 people inside the Rose Bowl, plus millions watching on television, was completely captivated. The performance lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes that changed the landscape of halftime shows forever. After Michael Jackson, the Super Bowl halftime became an event unto itself. Artists fought for the slot. Budgets ballooned. Expectations skyrocketed. Michael had set a standard that every performer since has had to measure themselves against. But here's the detail most people forget. At the end of the performance during Heal the World, Michael brought children onto the stage. Hundreds of them. They surrounded him, holding hands, singing along. It was a moment designed to be uplifting, hopeful, a message of unity and love. And watching the footage now, knowing what would happen just months later, the image takes on a different tone. Not sinister, just deeply, tragically ironic. The weeks after the Super Bowl were, by all accounts, some of the best in Michael's recent life. The reviews were overwhelmingly positive. Critics praised the performance. Television ratings broke records. The NFL was thrilled. Dangerous shot back up the charts. Michael's Heal the World Foundation received significant donations and attention. For a brief window, everything seemed to be going right. Michael used the momentum to launch the Dangerous World Tour. The tour had started in 1992, but the Super Bowl gave it a massive boost. Shows in Europe, Asia, South America. Everywhere Michael went, stadiums sold out. The performances were elaborate, exhausting productions that pushed Michael and his crew to their limits. But Michael thrived on that pressure. He always had. The stage was where he felt most himself, most in control. In early 1993, Michael was also working on other projects. He'd started talking to Sony about a new album. He was negotiating film deals, planning future tours. His business empire was vast and complicated, but at that moment, it seemed manageable. Michael was on top of the world, and he knew it. There's a photo from February 1993 taken backstage at one of the Dangerous tour stops. Michael is smiling, genuinely smiling, not the public smile he wore for cameras, a real, unguarded moment of happiness. People who were there said he was in a good mood during that period, joking with crew members, engaging with fans. He seemed lighter than he'd been in years. And then came August. On August 17, 1993, the Los Angeles Police Department confirmed they were investigating allegations that Michael Jackson had sexually abused a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler. The news broke like a bomb. Within hours, it was the top story on every news channel. Within days, it had consumed Michael's life entirely. The details of the case are complicated and have been examined exhaustively. Jordan Chandler's father, Evan Chandler, was a dentist who'd become close to Michael through his son. According to reports, Evan confronted Michael in July 1993, demanding $20 million and threatening to go public with abuse allegations if Michael didn't pay. Michael refused. Evan went to the police. And suddenly, the biggest star on the planet was under investigation for one of the most serious crimes imaginable. Michael maintained his innocence from the beginning. He released statements through his lawyers calling the allegations totally false and claiming he was the victim of extortion. But the damage was immediate. The Dangerous tour, which had been scheduled to continue through the rest of 1993, became a nightmare. Sponsors pulled out. Some venues canceled shows. The media circus was overwhelming. Everywhere Michael went, reporters followed, shouting questions about the allegations. The investigation was invasive in ways that are hard to overstate. In December 1993, police obtained a search warrant for Michael's Neverland Ranch. They spent hours searching the property looking for evidence. They also obtained a warrant to photograph Michael's body. The boy had described certain marks and characteristics he claimed to have seen. Police wanted to verify his account. Michael was required to undergo a strip search, where investigators photographed his genitals and buttocks. The humiliation was profound, and the fact that those photos existed, that they were part of a legal record, haunted Michael for the rest of his life. The case never went to trial. In January 1994, Michael agreed to a civil settlement with the Chandler family. The amount was reported to be between $15 and $25 million, though exact figures were never confirmed. Michael's lawyers said the settlement was necessary because the civil trial was scheduled before the criminal investigation could conclude, meaning Michael would have been forced to testify in the civil case, potentially damaging his defense in any criminal proceedings. But the settlement was widely interpreted as an admission of guilt. Why would an innocent man pay millions of dollars to make accusations go away? The criminal investigation continued for several months after the settlement, but without the cooperation of the Chandlers, who refused to testify after receiving the settlement money, prosecutors didn't have enough evidence to bring charges. In September 1994, the case was officially closed with no charges filed. So, what's the connection to the Super Bowl? Why does that performance matter in the context of what came after? Because timing is everything, and the timing of Michael Jackson's Super Bowl performance and the Chandler allegations couldn't have been more cruelly perfect. 7 months. That's all the time that elapsed between Michael standing on that stage in front of the world at the absolute peak of his powers and Michael becoming the subject of a criminal investigation that would destroy his reputation. 7 months is nothing. It's a blink. And yet, in those 7 months, Michael went from being universally celebrated to universally questioned. The Super Bowl performance became a marker, a dividing line. Before and after, the last time the world saw Michael Jackson without suspicion. The last time his relationship with children was viewed as innocent, or at worst, eccentric. Watch the Super Bowl performance now, and it's impossible not to see it through the lens of what came after. The children on stage during Heal the World. Michael's message of love and unity. His Heal the World Foundation, which focused specifically on helping children. All of it takes on a different weight. Not because anything about the performance itself was inappropriate, but because the allegations reframed everything, changed the context, made innocent gestures seem suspicious in retrospect. This is what allegations do. They rewrite history. They change how we see the past. Michael Jackson spent the rest of his life trying to escape the shadow of 1993. He gave interviews proclaiming his innocence. He continued to work with children through his charity efforts. He maintained that he was the victim of extortion and character assassination. And there are people who believe him. People who point to the fact that no criminal charges were ever filed, that the Chandler family's motivations were questionable, that subsequent allegations, including those that led to Michael's 2005 trial, resulted in acquittal. But there are also people who believe the allegations, who point to the settlement as evidence of guilt, who see Michael's behavior around children as, at minimum, inappropriate. The truth is complicated, and in many ways, unknowable. The Chandler case settled without a trial. Jordan Chandler never testified under oath. The evidence was never fully presented in public. We're left with competing narratives and no definitive answers. What we do know is this. After August 1993, Michael Jackson was never the same. The investigation and its aftermath took a massive psychological toll. Michael, according to people close to him, became increasingly paranoid. He believed he was being watched, followed, plotted against. He retreated further into Neverland, surrounding himself with a smaller and smaller circle of people he felt he could trust. The impact on his career was equally devastating. Michael continued to release music and perform, but the commercial success never reached the heights of Thriller or Bad Again. History, released in 1995, was partially a response to the allegations. Songs like They Don't Care About Us and Tabloid Junkie directly addressed what Michael felt was unfair media treatment. The album sold well, but the reception was mixed. Critics noted the defensive, sometimes angry tone. The public, divided on the allegations, didn't embrace the work the way they had before. Michael's tours after 1993 were successful in terms of ticket sales, but they lacked the cultural dominance of earlier tours. He was no longer universally beloved, he was controversial. And controversy, while it can generate attention, doesn't generate the kind of broad, wholehearted adoration Michael had experienced in the 80s. His personal life became increasingly chaotic. The marriage to Lisa Marie Presley in 1994, which many viewed as an attempt to rehabilitate his image by showing he had adult relationships. The subsequent marriage to Debbie Rowe and the birth of his first 2 children. The bizarre public appearances. The financial troubles that emerged in the 2000s. All of it traced back in some way to the damage done in 1993. And then there's the question nobody can answer definitively. What if the allegations had never happened? It's impossible to know, but you can sketch the outlines of an alternate timeline. Michael continues the dangerous tour without interruption, finishes the year on a high note, goes into the studio in 1994 to work on a new album without the weight of scandal hanging over him. Releases music that isn't defensive or angry, but creative and exploratory. Maybe collaborates with the artists who were emerging in the mid-90s, staying relevant in a changing musical landscape. In that alternate timeline, Michael's eccentricities remain just that. Eccentricities. Quirks of a genius who never had a normal childhood. His relationships with children remain odd but not criminal. His Neverland Ranch remains a strange but ultimately harmless expression of his desire to recapture lost youth. He ages into an elder statesman of pop music. Still weird, still reclusive, but respected, celebrated, not destroyed. But that's not what happened. And you can draw a straight line from the Super Bowl performance in January 1993 to Michael's death in June 2009. Not because the performance caused anything, but because it marked the peak, the moment before the fall, the last time Michael Jackson stood in front of the world and everyone watching saw only greatness. There's a moment in the Super Bowl footage that's easy to miss. Near the end of Heal the World, as hundreds of children surround Michael on stage, the camera catches him in profile. He's looking out at the crowd, and for just a second his expression shifts. The performer mask drops, and he looks almost sad, like he knows something the rest of us don't. Like he can see what's coming. It's probably nothing. A trick of lighting. A random expression caught between moments of performance. But watching it now, knowing everything that came after it, feels like more than that. It feels like a goodbye. The last moment of innocence before everything changed. 7 months after that performance, Michael Jackson's life became a legal and public relations nightmare that he never fully escaped. The allegations, true or false, followed him for the rest of his life. Every interaction with children was scrutinized, every charitable effort questioned, every public appearance analyzed for signs of guilt or innocence. The Chandler case set a template that would be repeated. In 2003, Michael faced another set of allegations, this time from a boy named Gavin Arvizo. The case went to trial. Michael was acquitted on all counts in 2005. But the trial was brutal. Witnesses testified about Michael's behavior. Prosecutors painted him as a predator. The defense argued that the Arvizo family was motivated by money and that their story was inconsistent and unreliable. The jury sided with Michael, but the damage was done. Again. After the acquittal, Michael left the United States. He spent time in Bahrain, Ireland, various places where he could avoid the intense scrutiny he faced in America. He began planning a comeback, a series of concerts in London. This is it. 50 shows that were supposed to prove he could still perform at the highest level, that he wasn't finished, that he could reclaim some of what had been lost. But Michael never made it to London. On June 25, 2009, he died in his Los Angeles home from an overdose of propofol, a surgical anesthetic his personal physician had been administering to help him sleep. He was 50 years old, and the world, which had spent the last 16 years questioning him, mourning him, arguing about him, suddenly united in grief. In the aftermath of his death, something strange happened. The allegations didn't disappear, but they became less central to how people remembered Michael. The focus shifted back to the music, the performances, the artistry. Michael Jackson, the cultural icon, overshadowed Michael Jackson, the accused. The Super Bowl performance got replayed endlessly. News segments called it one of the greatest live performances in history. And people watching it, many for the first time or the first time in years, remembered why Michael had been so beloved in the first place. But you can't separate the art from the life. Not entirely. And the Super Bowl performance exists now in this complicated space. It's a piece of pop culture history, a moment of genuine brilliance. And it's also the last snapshot of Michael Jackson before his image changed forever. Before suspicion replaced admiration, before every gesture, every word, every relationship was filtered through the lens of criminal allegations. Does that make the performance less impressive? No. Michael's talent was real. His ability to command a stage was undeniable. The Super Bowl halftime show was a masterpiece of performance art, but it makes the performance sadder, because you can't watch it without knowing what comes next. Without seeing the children on stage and wondering what Michael was thinking. Without hearing the lyrics to Heal the World and feeling the weight of irony pressed down. The question people still argue about is whether Michael was guilty. The evidence is murky. The Chandler case settled without trial, so we never got to see the full legal arguments or hear witness testimony under cross-examination. The Arvizo case went to trial and resulted in acquittal, but some people believe the jury got it wrong. Others point to Michael's bizarre behavior, his obsession with children, his Neverland sleepovers, and say, even if he wasn't guilty of criminal conduct, his actions were inappropriate and disturbing. Michael's defenders argued that he was a man who never had a childhood, who was trying to give children the joy he never experienced, and that his behavior, while unusual, was innocent. They point to the lack of physical evidence in both cases, the credibility issues with the accusers' families, the financial motivations, the media circus that made a fair assessment nearly impossible. The truth is, we don't know, not for certain. Michael Jackson is dead. Jordan Chandler never testified in a criminal trial. The evidence that existed was never fully aired in public in a way that allows for definitive conclusions. We're left with opinions, beliefs, interpretations of incomplete information. What we can say with certainty is that the allegations changed everything. They ended Michael's reign as the undisputed king of pop. They turned him from a beloved eccentric into a controversial figure. They made his later years a series of desperate attempts to reclaim what had been lost. And they ensured that his legacy would forever be debated rather than simply celebrated. So, when you watch the Super Bowl performance from January 31st, 1993, what are you watching? You're watching the end of an era. The last moment before Michael Jackson's life took a turn from which he never recovered. The final performance before suspicion became the dominant lens through which his every action was viewed. It's a document of talent and ambition and meticulous planning. And it's also a ghost, a reminder of what was lost. Not just for Michael, but for everyone who loved his music and believed in his message. 7 months. That's all the time that stood between triumph and catastrophe. Between universal adulation and criminal investigation. Between being the biggest star in the world and being the most controversial. And looking back, knowing what was coming, the Super Bowl performance feels less like a celebration and more like a farewell. The last perfect moment before everything fell apart. Michael Jackson gave the world one of the greatest halftime shows in history on January 31st, 1993. And 7 months later, on August 17th, 1993, his life changed forever. Those two dates are connected, not causally, but symbolically. The peak and the fall, the moment of total control and the moment control was lost forever. That's the story nobody talks about when they replay the Super Bowl footage. That's the context that makes the performance more than just entertainment. It's a historical marker. The before picture in a before and after story. The last time Michael Jackson stood on a stage and everyone watching saw only magic.